So we've been talking about the ecology of biological communities, the ecology of whole ecosystems, and we keep saying, this stupid kid in his never-ending game of Jenga, that it's a delicate balance. Why does one piece affect the others? It's down to relationships. It's down to relationships. Just like a lot of your life is down to relationships. Having wonderful, supportive people around you who take care of you and help you out when you need it, or having people who are struggling to take care of themselves and maybe they can't take great care of you, that changes how your life goes. You know? The other species that are around one species in an ecosystem, it changes how their life goes. It changes how successful they are. It changes the face of the whole ecosystem. And it's down to relationships. So I think many of you have at least one sibling. I know a few of you are in my boat, but I think many of you have at least one sibling. So you will very immediately recognize and sympathize with this next kind of relationship. Competition. Competition is what happens when you have two species who need the same things. And they need the same things when they have a lot of overlap in their niche. These are two squirrel species. They're closely related. They're different species in the same genus. Similar habits, similar food requirements, similar nesting requirements. Therefore, we're going to see more competition. Now, who here is competitive? Awesome. So, you may have strong feelings about the whole everybody gets a trophy thing. Because here's the fact, folks. And I don't consider myself to be uber competitive, but I think everybody gets a trophy is kind of stupid. Like, oh, you're all first. No, you're not. There are winners, there are losers, it's okay. You know, if we're talking about basketball, baseball, soccer, it's fine. Here's the other part. In the actual real world, there are species that lose. If you're just not a very good predator, you don't get enough calories, you don't stay alive, you don't have babies, you're done. You're not very well camouflaged. You either evolve and change, you die out, you're done. So there are times when a species can't compete and they may die out. And in that film we saw about whales, when whales had legs, there were species that died out. Now they changed sufficiently that there were new species that took their place, but those old species went extinct. They were driven to extinction by the environment. This is what we call competitive exclusion. When within an ecosystem you have two species competing and one just can't hack it. They just can't hack it. They end up eliminated from the community because of competition for some limited resource. The more efficient predator wins, or the sneakier prey species wins, or the one who's able to boot others out of their nest wins. The one who gets up earlier to harvest all the berries. The one who is a better seeker of edible whatevers. The one who gets up earliest gets all the blueberry muffins that are in the kitchen. Those who sleep in on Saturday morning get no muffins. So here's the question. If we have a specialist species and a generalist species, which one's more likely to survive? Which one's, talk about it at your table, don't yell it out. Which one is more likely to make it? This is garlic mustard, and garlic mustard is not a native plant. That is garlic mustard. That is the name of the plant. It's edible. I've eaten it. I won't say it's delicious. Huh? It's spicy because it's all the mustards. So mustard is a condiment, obviously, made from the seeds of plants called mustards. And there are hundreds of species of greens-bearing plants called mustards. There are Asian mustards, Mizuna mustards. There are all kinds of, you can grow mustard in your garden. And most of them have leaves that have a little bit of spice to them. If you've ever gotten like a mixed baby green salad in a fancy restaurant, or like gone to Giant Eagle and they have fancy mixed greens, a lot of those will have baby mustard greens in them. Whoops. So garlic mustard is a non-native species. It's from, I think, Europe, but I would have to look that up. And it is, you know, like I said, it's edible. It tastes, if you crush the leaves, they'll smell kind of garlicky. And I was out in January and I saw some of them, their early leaves look different than their taller leaves. So the bottom leaves look like that, and then the top leaves are more triangular. And there were early garlic mustard leaves up in January. Yeah, they'll come up with any worm spell. But you know what I should tell you about first? Let me get rid of all these. The story is really about the light in the spring woods. So, if you've ever been out in the spring woods, I gotta say, April in the woodlands of Ohio and Pennsylvania is absolutely the most magical thing there is, because there's light. The trees haven't leafed out yet. So like late March and early April, up through about the end of April, there is light hitting the forest floor. And you know what's happening down there? There are little tiny plants, and they are called spring ephemerals. Do you know what it means to be ephemeral? No. You're going to learn vocabulary words today. It's short-lived. So it's something that is short-lived. Ephemeral. These little spring ephemerals, and some of them are orchids and little lilies, little trout lilies and bloodroot and wild ginger and all these plants that live down in the woods. And they start sending up leaves late February, early March. They're already sticking their heads out up there. And they've got about 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks. Why? What's closing in? Leaf out. Leaf out. It's not even about the trees growing. The trees are there. But it's about the leaves coming out. And once those leaves come out, is there a whole lot of sunlight down there? No. So these guys have got maybe 3 or 4 weeks to get their heads stuck up, get their leaves out, produce enough energy, store it in their roots, reproduce, drop seed, and then die back. They're going to do it all in 3 weeks. They got a deadline. Because their sunlight, their big resource that they need, is ending. So they need that sunlight, and they need it early, and they've got a short window in which to get it. Okay, cool. So you can go out in the spring, and you can go looking for spring ephemerals. You can go down to Beaver Creek State Park. You can go to any of the state forests around here. Oh, yeah, wait, back to garlic mustard. So this garlic mustard is a non-native, and it forms really dense stands in the woods. Puts out a lot of leaves. Nothing really eats it. It's not native to this continent. The wildlife hasn't learned to eat it yet. I eat it, but you know, beyond that, no. Deer don't really seem to like it. Rabbits don't seem to like it. The other things that browse on that vegetation don't really seem to love it. And it produces, did I say a lot of leaves? It produces a lot of leaves. It shades out everything else. It's competing with all those spring ephemerals for a very limited resource. What is that limited resource? Sunlight. They all need sunlight. Now, I said that the garlic mustard, I saw garlic mustard out, in January. So garlic mustard doesn't only have 3 weeks. It's had its leaves up since January. Those early January ones are probably going to bloom any day now. And it's going to keep laying down seed and producing new plants. It'll produce new plants in May and June and July and August and September, and I've seen them go to seed in October. It's not all that picky. And it can do with full sunlight, it can do with partial shade. Heck, it can grow like between the cracks in a sidewalk. It's really not all that picky. But who's it competing with in those deep, dark woods? Those delicate little spring ephemerals that only have 3 weeks, and they can only grow there. What's happening in some places already here in Ohio is that some of those spring ephemerals are getting outcompeted. They're getting excluded. They can't compete with garlic mustard. It grows fast and aggressively, and it shades them out, and they just can't win. So there are literally woodlands where you don't find those spring ephemerals anymore, but you find giant stands of garlic mustard. That's competitive exclusion. Remember how we said a single species introduced or removed can really change a biological community? You go from having 15 species of spring ephemeral to having a giant stand of nothing but garlic mustard. That changes a community. Now, I should also tell you about garlic mustard. You want to talk about will to live? Woman I know who worked for Division of Natural Areas and used to do work at the Beaver Creek State Forest down here. They would go out and pull garlic mustard. They would have garlic mustard pulling parties. So they would invite the public to come, bring your gardening gloves, bring your boots. We'll provide the trash bags, and we'll give you snacks and drinks and whatever else. Josh, head up. Chelsea, head up. Thanks. And they would have, all these people tearing out garlic mustard, trying to eliminate it from competition, putting it in big black garbage bags. And she said, well, we used to go ahead and we would just throw the back garbage bags in the back of my truck. We would leave them out in the sun and let it bake real good, and then we'd throw them in the dumpster. She said, but then one year I tore open one of those bags that had been in my truck for like 3 weeks in the sun, and I found seeds that had sprouted. They had survived that. So one of the things about garlic mustard, when you pull it, number one, if there's any little tiny bit of root left, that'll grow a whole new plant. Number two, even once you pull it, if it's got flowers on it, those flowers will complete their life cycle. They'll form seeds. The seeds will drop and they'll germinate even after you've pulled it out of the ground. And apparently they'll survive 2 weeks in a black garbage bag in the back of a truck in the sun and do that. So she said, well, now what we do is we leave them in my truck for a few weeks and then we incinerate them. She said, I think that does it. Those little tiny delicate flowers don't stand a chance. The garlic mustard can outcompete them. Okay. What else can happen when a species is faced with harsh competition? So we can change the whole community. We can have things that just get extirpated. Or we can see that species start to evolve. Species start to change. Maybe there's somewhere, some little lady slipper orchid that finds it can live in the tiny little space left out by the garlic mustard. Maybe it can live in slightly deeper shade than garlic mustard can tolerate. So over a bunch of generations, species will actually change to use different parts of the resource, to use different resources. Okay, fine. Who was competing? Emma and I were competing for banana nut bread. Fine. She's going to eat the banana nut bread. I'll just eat blueberry muffins. That's okay. I can eat something else. I can eat carrot muffins. I'm not that picky. Again, generalists have an advantage here because a species that has more flexibility has a better chance of adapting over many generations to minimize their competition. Everybody gets to stay, but you might not be doing exactly what you were hoping for or eating exactly what you were hoping for. This is the idea. I'm going to have you fill in the blanks here, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more tomorrow. Who here has ever had to share a bedroom with a sibling? Okay. So I've heard that can lead to some disagreements about whose stuff is what. This is what I've heard. And I've heard that some siblings resort to things like drawing masking tape lines down the middle of the room. This is your side, this is my side. Stay off of my side. Don't touch my stuff. I have a friend who shared a room and a bed with her sister until they both moved out of the house. It was an old Greek family, and that was the way they did things. They got one double bed for the girls, and they slept in that until they left the house. And they fought like cats and dogs because they had to share everything in that room. Yes. They were a little sensitive about it. Well, what if you could divide up the thing that you're competing over so that you don't have to compete? And this is a phenomenon that's been observed in nature. It was first observed in these little bird species that nest up in the northern woods of Michigan. They all eat bugs. They all forage for bugs in these pine forests. But what's amazing is that some of those birds only look for food at the tops of the trees. Am I interrupting you, Miranda? Some of those birds only look for bugs down on the bottom of the tree. Some of those birds only look for bugs right along the trunk. Some of those birds only look on the outsides. They've divided up the same trees in the same forest. All packed up, huh? Excellent. Okay, see you Monday.